Yo, 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 what is up, legends? We are back again with your boy Jay, and we are drawing another picture today. Now, today we are experimenting with a technique that I'm not used to at all. So, when we render this picture, we will be using grayscale and then converting the grayscale into color. I've always seen a lot of high profile artists do this technique, and so I was really curious as to if I can use it and if it will improve my workflow and maybe even allow me to refine some of my rendering. Because whenever I do lighting with colors, there's a lot of complicated things happening. Different colors apply different kind of light and dark effects. So you're not necessarily just nailing the value. You have to mess with saturation and all these different aspects of color that might affect how the lighting looks. So I thought to myself, okay, how about I just nail it with black and white? How about I just try to do just raw black and white and see how that looks? Well, not black and white, but grayscale. We should use the word grayscale. It's a little bit more applicable. So what can we accomplish with grayscale? And I think grayscale is very interesting because it does speed up your process a little bit at first, because you're not thinking about colors. You're just using grays, right? Different values of grays. And you can just go ham and paint just entirely gray. But I think I actually ran into quite a few issues when I actually tried to convert the colors, because there's really no good way to perfectly change the gray into colors without having the values be kind of like distorted, right? Your gray values right now might look perfect to you, right? The light and the darkness of it might look perfect. But the moment you add in another color on top of it, or the moment you convert it into another color, it becomes a whole different looking thing. And that wasn't something that I didn't expect, right? I expected to have to fix it, but I think overall, I still had to change way too much of the colors for the grayscale to be worth it. I think like there was a lot of like fiddling with the colors to get it correct, and some overpainting after the fact to improve it. And so I really like the fact that I can just render and render and render without thinking about colors. But the colored piece ultimately still required a lot of adjustments. And I think when I got too comfortable with the grayscale, I just went a little too ham with certain aspects of the darkness and lightness, because the gray simply didn't look that dark when it was gray. But when I applied the colors and the colors started contrasting, it just got kind of out of hand. It just didn't really work in a way where I wanted it to work. And whenever I start messing with levels, saturation, darkness, and lightness, I have a pretty bad habit of making this kind of like really burned look kind of with the colors, where the contrast is just a little too insane looking. So that was definitely an issue I ran into when I was working with this grayscale. But I think just for practice purposes, the grayscale is something that I think every artist should master, because being able to see the values of the color of the lighting and to create three-dimensionality out of just grayscale, it will carry over with colors. You might not be able to convert the gray into the perfect colors that you want, and eventually you might want to learn to paint without a grayscale. But grayscale studies are actually pretty incredible for allowing you to understand how to render shapes and how edges interact with each other, and kind of creating the relationship of hard and soft shadows. In this piece in particular, I think I'm relatively satisfied with the way I did the lighting, but I think I might have used too much dark. I got a little too comfortable with just slabbing that gray everywhere, because when I finished adding the colors, it turned out that a lot of the painting ended up being in the dark, and I lost a lot of detail that I painted in grayscale when I added the color. So that's something that you will definitely run into when you attempt this technique. And when at this point, I don't think I'll do this technique anymore, because personally I think being able to just get the color you want and painting with it is a lot more easier to understand for my brain than trying to paint with gray and then turning gray into the colors, even though they don't translate perfectly well. There's just a lot of remnants and cleanup that you have to do when you work with Grayscale and attempt to convert it to colors. It always has this like weird kind of like dirty-ish look that I'm not a big fan of. Obviously, it's something that I can learn to fix, but I think at this point I kind of prefer using just the straight colors. I'm sure Grayscale is faster if you master it, but I think I prefer just the painting. So as you can see, I'm messing with the colors right now. It's very difficult to control it, right? Because when you mess with the whole color, you're messing with every single body part, right? You're messing with the saturation, you're messing with the curves of every single part of the body that shares that color. And I guess, you know, I probably could have went in with a little bit more finesse and choose very specific body parts to edit in terms of the colors to make it more to my liking and make it more accurate to what the lighting is. But it never really seemed like it was something that would have looked that off until I was done with it and really saw that it was really strange looking. And so this technique, I looked at a few YouTube tutorials. There are very good tutorials out there on converting gray to colors. There's plenty of resources out there if you look. Not very difficult on YouTube alone. There's quite a few. And you know, I don't think this is necessarily a technique issue. It's just that it was just kind of hard for me to control what colors I wanted where. And when they ended up contrasting a little too much, I just lost the ability to really finally control what colors I wanted. And so looking at the final piece, you know, I don't particularly dislike it. I think it ended up being, you know, fairly decent. I think the core base drawing has some issues. I think some of the rendering got a little bit too... It's a little bit sloppy in some areas, but you know, for an experimental piece, I think it's pretty cool. It's the first time I drew muscles on a female as well. But yeah, Grayscale technique. What do you think? Compared to my other pieces, do you think this one might have turned out kind of a little bit better? I personally don't think so. I think there's some aspects of the rendering where it looks really good, but some of the colors just look a little too dark, a little too burned out, too saturated, too weird. I don't like not being able to control the colors the way I want it to look. I don't like having to go through too many filters. So in conclusion, Grayscale's probably not the move for me, but I can definitely see a lot of utility in using it to improve your workflow and to make sure that you have a good grasp on how you want to render the light and the dark and just your values in general, right? Because I do understand that if you just use colors, it can be very, very overwhelming. And you might make a lot of mistakes because you're too fixated on how to apply certain colors in certain areas to match the accuracy of the color, but you're forgetting about its values and darkness and hue and saturation and all of that shit. All of color theory is incredibly difficult. So I think if you're just starting out and you don't have great experience with colors, I think it is completely feasible to start with Grayscale. Hell, even if you are experiencing with color, you know, you might be able to easily convert the gray into colors. But I think for me personally, I'm in this weird middle ground where my Grayscale is like, where my Grayscale doesn't translate into color all that well. So for me personally, I think I much prefer going the color way. And I think it's a good way for me to train my eye to be able to view colors. And so, you know, it was an interesting experiment. I have one more video where I attempt to use Grayscale. Also didn't really work out particularly well. But, you know, I appreciate being able to do this experiment and learning what worked for me and what didn't. And, you know, if you do coloring yourself, I think you should give this a try. And I think you might be able to learn something from this. Yeah, let me know what you think. Leave your comments below. Hit that subscribe button if you want to see more art videos. And I'll see you next time.